Welcome to the Put On Waivers Media Group, home of the Put On Raiders podcast and the Student Body Right podcast. This is your place for the best breakdowns and the best insight for those who fight on and bleed silver and black. Now, here are your hosts, Dwayne Douglas and Ryan Holmes.
And welcome everybody to the glorious episode of the Student Body Right USC podcast. I'm your host, Dwayne Douglas, and I am podcasting out the beautiful shores of the Pacific Ocean. It's cold this morning, though. I'm from the East Coast originally, but it's a little chilly this morning. Our POR SBR is my Twitter handle. We have a guest on our show, Locked On Utes, JT Wistrchill. If I got it wrong, I'm sorry. I try my best.
You good?
I practiced it so many times before you came on, but not only do the UCLA Bruins and the USC Trojans have a big game, but the Ducks, the Utes should be a big game as well. Welcome to the show, JT. I know you were on before. Thank you for coming. The other day, I was watching the Utes play, and Cam Rising didn't come out and play. What was that, at the Washington State game?
Washington State, yeah, that was late October.
What was going on there?
Okay, so Cam Rising in that game, it was a complete shock to everyone. So that game was at Washington State, and Utah was coming off their bye week after they had beaten your Trojans. But for Utah in that one, no one knew what was really going on. All of a sudden, Cam was warming up and everything, and then apparently about 40 minutes before the game started, he told Coach Whittingham, because he got a little dinged up in that USC game. I don't know if it came on that final 2-point conversion. I mean, that was just a physical. It was a great back and forth game between two great teams. And it's personally one I'm hoping to see a rematch of in the Pac-12 championship game. But for Cam Rising, so what happened there was he told Coach Witt, hey, I don't feel good. I can't play today. So that caught everyone off guard, and Utah had to throw out Bryson Barnes, their backup quarterback. I was not at the game, but talking to people inside the department and other media members who were covering it, everyone was blindsided. You could tell on the broadcast, they were freaking out. No one knew what was going on. So Cam was banged up there, a little bit of a lower leg injury. Coach Whittingham doesn't give us anything when it comes to injuries. So we do not know exactly what the injury was, but I'll say this. He played against Stanford. He played against Arizona. He looked a little bit better in each game. And I expect him to be above at 80, or at least not, or pretty sure he'll be around 90 at this point in terms of health. He's gotten off to a little bit of slow starts against Stanford and Arizona, but I'll tell you this, Dwayne, I think he's definitely the more healthy of the two starting quarterbacks going into this Saturday's matchup with Oregon. Yeah,
should be an interesting game there as far as that goes. Can I, I understand the SEC is king as far as depth of talent. I'm not disputing that. But when Feinbaum comes on ESPN and all that stuff like that, it just drives me crazy. Like when he was supposed to be a guy who knows college football, and Keyshawn Johnson was on there, and they were going through USC schedule. Like teams make their schedule. Nobody will talk about Austin Peay playing Alabama this week, but they'll talk about.
I brought that up on my show too. It's like it's a joke. It's absolutely insane. You can't do that this late in the season. It's awful.
And also, nobody will talk about like the last minute drive it took Georgia to beat Missouri, who's not a good football team at all. But when he said it really took to heart when I heard him say, basically poo-pooing playing at Utah. And I was just like, I mean, like, are you, I know the emotions. I know a couple of players passed away. They had them on the helmets. They had every bit of emotion in that game. But since when has Utah been an easy place to play? Like,
they haven't lost a true home game since 2018. USC actually won at Utah in 2020, but what makes Utah such a tough place to play? Fans being there. So that's why this team has been unbelievable at home. And it's a 1-point road loss to a team that is currently ranked in the top 10 right now. And it's a loss you're going to have a chance to avenge at the end of the season. So, yeah, I mean, USC is still very much in the playoff hunt. I think it's stupid to say otherwise, because if you look at how USC's schedule can play out, they have a chance to get a win over a Notre Dame team who just got ranked. They have a chance this week to get a win against UCLA, and that's still a really good UCLA team. If you look at what UCLA's done, they have a really good win against Utah. They have a really good win against Washington. Yes, they lost to Oregon, and they have a bad loss to Arizona, but look at how many good teams over the past few years have that random bad loss. How many times has Ohio State lost to Purdue over the years? That's what I compare that UCLA loss to Arizona. So even if UCLA loses to USC, that's still a really good team that has beaten 2 top 25 teams. So USC, if they can win out and beat Utah in the Pac-12 championship or whoever's there, they're a one-loss conference champion, and that one loss is by 1 point on the road to a top 10 team. They are absolutely in the college football playoff.
Yeah, and I mean, even, I mean, I wouldn't even consider, and it will be hard to do, removing undefeated TCU.
No, exactly. No, TCU gets disrespected the same way.
Yeah.
I've heard so many people talk about TCU, like, I'm not sure if we buy them. And it does feel like brand bias, because I feel like if Texas was doing the same thing, or if Oklahoma was doing the exact same thing, I feel like we would be hyping those teams up. But just because it's TCU and no one expected them to be good, so we're all holding on to those biases of, are they legit? I mean, even if they're a one-loss conference champ, their schedule looks much better than Clemson's does to me. I'd much rather put TCU in, and I think they should remain in there. And they're going to have a legit argument at the end of the year, because their strength of schedule has been really good, even though they don't play in the SEC gauntlet, as everyone loves to go crazy over.
And the last thing about the SEC, I'll say this is, what's going on? Everybody talks a lot about SEC, and how tough it is. But how many games that you've watched from the SEC that are played in the 40s? Like, yeah. But the Pac-12 will get labeled as no defense. But you go there, and I'm watching games. It's 42 something to somebody. It's 42-38. The game is played in the 50s sometimes. Like, it's not like, they're winning these games 21-22.
Yeah, and it feels like the SEC and the Pac-12 are actually very similar this year. I know a lot of people be like, how dare you compare those two conferences? But look at how the top of the Pac-12, there's a reason Pac-12 has 6 teams ranked in the top 25. It's really good this year. Mm-hmm. And the SEC, I believe they have 5 teams ranked that high, because there's a lot of good teams. And there's those other teams in the SEC, let's say the Florida, let's say the Kentucky, who ended up disappointing, but we know there are certain teams they can go out there and get an upset against. So the two conferences are very similar to me. And the SEC does have those bad games. Like you mentioned, they have those games against Missouri, which is that's still a bad game for Georgia. That's kind of why everyone's like, huh? But Georgia's a weird team. It really does kind of feel like they're the kind of team, like how an NBA team in the regular season only gets up to play the good teams. That's what Georgia feels like, because they continually do that. We saw what they did against Tennessee, and whoever they see in the SEC championship game, I think if it's LSU, I think they're going to steamroll LSU. I think everyone's all excited about LSU right now, and they got a huge win over Alabama. All the credit for them there. But they're still a 2-loss team, and I think by the time the season's over, they're going to be a 3-loss team, which overall, if you're talking about 3 losses in Baton Rouge, that's still a lot for a season, but that's a conversation for another day. But I totally agree with you. I'm always get frustrated by the SEC bias, just because in the past, they've ran the sport, but this year it's very different, and there have been other years where it's very different. There's been years in the past where I would argue the Big Ten has been better than the SEC, but as you mentioned, those people in the South, they're just not going to listen to that.
They're not going to listen to anybody else. Let's talk about your game real quick. What are the keys to victory for the Utes here as they face Oregon? I mean, I know it's a situation where it's weird in college football. College in the NFL, the backup quarterback comes in. Everybody will gather seats and then leave the stadium because it's pretty much over. College football is a little different. Like, I mean, you see a backup come in and play pretty well in college football. What are your thoughts about the Utes playing at the Ducks?
Yeah, so this is going to be a fun game, and the Ducks may be without Bo Nix, so we don't know what's going on. Ty Thompson is their backup quarterback. He doesn't really scare me as a Utah fan. I mean, he's thrown 2 interceptions on the year. Just not. He's only a freshman. Played a little bit last year, but not really someone who does scare me. I mean, it's the reason. That's the reason the line is kind of swung in favor of Utah. It was originally Oregon +3. Now it's Utah. Now it's Utah favored in this one. So for me, I do feel like I like the Utes in this one, just because it feels like Bo Nix. I'm just not sure if he's going to play. And there was a Oregon player let it slip in an interview this week that Bo Nix, he even said like Bo's down. So like we'll see what happens. I still think Bo Nix is actually going to play. I know Utah is still preparing for Bo Nix for a fact. You're just going to do that whenever the best quarterback's on the other side. But as I mentioned, I expect to see Cam Rising at, honestly, I said 80 to 90. The more I talk and think about it, I mean, he was pretty much at 80 last week, so I expect him to be at 90. He didn't take a lot of hits, really, at all. He's a very different runner than he's been very much more cautious, I'll say, than when he played USC, and especially when he played at UCLA, where he was really just kind of recklessly throwing his body out. He's been taking better care of himself. So I expect him to be at 90%. For Bo Nix, I mean, I don't know what we're going to get from him if he plays. Is Bo Nix at 50, 60, 70%? Is he better than Ty Thompson? I don't know. I mean, honestly, he might be. I mean, we've seen what a good year Bo Nix has had. So because of the injury there, I feel like it'll hamper the Oregon offense a little bit. I'm actually a big fan of Bo Nix. I wouldn't be surprised to see the old Bo Nix pop out in this game, because I think if Utah gets off to a good start and Oregon falls behind, Bo is going to feel the need to press, and that's what usually leads to turnovers. So in this one, I do really like Utah. I just feel like, yes, Oregon's going to do a good job stopping the run, but their secondary is not very good. So I feel like whether you're talking about Dalton Kincaid, who is a little banged up, I think he's going to have a good game. And I think especially Utah's receivers, Devon Vele, Money Parks, Jalen Dixon are all in for really big nights in Eugene. I think Cam is going to be awesome. This is going to be another four passing touchdown performance for him. And I think defensively, look, the Utes, if it is Ty Thompson, I think they'll be able to hold Oregon under 25 points. If it's Bo and he's looks somewhat like himself, I think this game will be high scoring, but I do expect the Utes to win, and I expect them to cover that line because of the health at quarterback and just how hot this Utah team's playing right now. Oregon caught a really bad string to end the season for their schedule. When you look at it, they just lost to Washington last week, then they have Utah, then they have Oregon State. If you look at Utah's last month, after they had that tough stretch of UCLA and USC playing two top 10 teams back to back, it got really easy for Utah. Washington State, you won with your backup quarterback. Arizona and Stanford, we know they're not very good. And Utah got them at home, where they just simply don't lose games. So in your last two games left on the season, Oregon this week, very difficult. But then after that, you go to Colorado. So Utah has gotten really lucky in that regard, where they've been kind of able to build their season and kind of work their players up, get those improvements in. And I'm feeling really good about Utah right now.
Yeah, Utah, I think definitely should be the overwhelming favorite to win that game. It's all you never know with backup quarterbacks. You could get it just takes it's football, so it takes one game. And also, can they stop the run? I mean, because can they stop the run against? Because you figure with a backup quarterback, they're gonna kind of
that'll be the test.
Lean on the run. They will lean on the run as much as they can to kind of get him comfortable, get him some throws that are gonna be easy for him going into that one. So, what are your thoughts about the other big Pac-12 battle? It'd been nice to have these games. Are they going to be almost at the same time at some point?
So I know the Oregon Utah one. I believe that one is an 8. I want to say it's 8:30.
8:30. Also, they try. So they try. So yeah. So because it would be nice to have like with these two games being as big as they are, even with the losses from last week. It'd be good to see them be a little bit separate in time, so we can kind of make sure we see both. But we thoughts about the Trojans and the Bruins here. What's your takeaway from the game you guys lost from UCLA and the win you had against USC?
Yeah, I'll say this even before we jump into that. This is an awesome week for the Pac-12. I mean, you get your 4 best teams in some combination playing each other. I can't wait to see how it all plays out. So going into this one, first UCLA, I thought Zach Charbonnet did a great job. I think DTR is a phenomenal quarterback. He did a good job. I was really impressed with the UCLA offensive line. I felt like the Utes made a lot of mistakes. There was a turnover in the red zone they had. There was another turnover that cost the Utes. And just defensively, there were a bunch of miscommunications. I do feel like that's a situation where if we had to play – look, if Utah was to go into UCLA, they very well lose the game, because this is a Utah team that, as good as they have been this season, you look at their 2 biggest road games, at UCLA, at Florida, those were both losses. So I do think if Utah still went to UCLA, there's a chance they could still lose that game, but they've cleaned up on so many of those miscommunications. They've been able to shore up the tackling. I feel like if those two teams met on a neutral field, I do feel like Utah would be able to get the win. But because Utah struggled to get home with their pass rush so many times, as they did against USC too, UCLA was really able to hang 40 on them. And that's what USC was able to do too. The difference in that one was Cam Rising and Dalton Kincaid put up 2 of the best performances we've ever seen inside Rice-Eccles Stadium. Those 2 players really willed Utah to a win. And Utah's offensive line did a good job, but USC was down a couple players in that game too. That kind of hurt their pass rush a little bit. So that game being at Rice-Eccles Stadium extremely benefited Utah. So this is I'm really excited for this game between the 2 powerhouses in California, the 2 future Big Ten members. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think this is the opportunity for USC to get that big win that so many people have been talking about that, hey, they don't really have right now. But for all these people who are like, are they legit? I just think it's so interesting, because it's like we literally saw them go at Utah, a team we have ranked in the top 10 that we know is really good. And they basically played them to a one-score game, and they should have honestly won that game if it wasn't for a couple of issues late defensively, honestly. I mean, you look at how many points they let up in that one. I really feel like that USC team was the better team that day. Now, when they meet in the Pac-12 championship game, I'll probably be biased to swing towards Utah, but I really like this USC team. I think they do get a win against this Florida team. I mean, when you're talking about all the weapons at Caleb Williams' disposal, even without Travis Dye, and even defensively, there's still guys on that defense who are capable of making those big turnovers. I think this is going to be an awesome game between two superstar quarterbacks with other stars all over the field. Guys like Mario Williams, of course. We know what Jake Bobo can do. There are just Jordan Addison. There are so many guys up and down these two rosters. So I am so excited to see these two teams go at it. And not just because you have the USC background on, Dwayne, but I really do like the Trojans in this one. And I really think we're heading for a rematch in the Pac-12 championship game between the Utes and the Trojans, because I believe those are the Pac-12's two best teams in a year when the conference is very good.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you look at throughout the conference, and we talk about it, and like I have a bunch of Pac-12 text threads, and there's quarterbacks in this conference. I mean, there's quarterbacks in this conference, and I mean, this guy, I mean, the guy in Arizona looks like Doug Flutie running around. He can throw the football like crazy. So, and they have a lot of weapons. If they ever get any kind of defense in Arizona, they could be a team that would be that could do some things as well. USC is getting Eric Gentry back, and also Mario Williams. Jordan Addison played a little bit last week, but I mean, they're pretty much tempoing everything for this game, because I think Lincoln Riley knows how big it is. I think the biggest issue in this game will be Travis Dye was probably almost like a extra offensive lineman, the way he protected the passer and pass pro. Lincoln Riley will find his rushing yards. I mean, you and I could be back there. He can get us 4 carry. Like, you know what I mean? It's just the way it is. Like, that dude knows how to get to get people some yards. But I worry about Austin. I worry about I worry about that. Malik Brown and Barlow and all those guys like that. Can they pass protect? That's the biggest thing in this game. If they do that, then I think they can win this game. So I mean, I don't care if they win it by one. They just got to get that. They just got to escape the Rose Bowl with a victory, and they're still in the Pac-12, and they're also in the college football championship as well. So Cam Rising is most likely going to the NFL next year, correct?
Yep. He said it was his final game in Rice-Eccles Stadium.
Oh yeah. So where do you see him in the whole group of guys? Because there's a lot of, and this channel is also a Raider channel, so we could possibly be looking for. Well, I think we're looking for a quarterback as well. Where do you feel like he would land with the Hookers and the Strouds and the Bryce Youngs and all those guys like that?
I'll be honest, and I really like Cam Rising. He's done so much for Utah. He's not even in the same conversation as those guys. His issues, accuracy, are been a little too much to ignore. So when you talk about Cam Rising for right now, we'll see what he does. I think he's going to play the rest. He's going to play the rest of the way for Utes. If he can lead them to another Pac-12 championship, I think there's something to say for a guy who shows up in the biggest moments and is a winner, as he's done a lot throughout his career. And I think the bowl game is going to be huge for him, regardless of if for Utah it's going to be a New Year's Six bowl or wherever it's going to be. I think he's got to play well in that bowl game. But right now, he's a day 3 guy. I look at a guy like Sam Ellinger from a few years ago, where I think he's an incredible backup. He's a great leader, a great presence in the locker room. He's a tough quarterback. He's kind of a surprising runner. He's willing to take on contact, willing to dive and fight for every yard. But accuracy-wise, there's some things left to be desired. He does not have the strongest arm, and we know how big strong arms are. That's why if I was rolling the dice as an NFL GM or head coach, I would still rather get my hands on an Anthony Richardson, who's not played as well this season, because with Anthony Richardson, I see a guy who has all the physical traits. We just need to hone a few things in. Versus Cam Rising, I don't know how much stronger his arm's going to get. And that was something he talked about going into the year. He's like, I'm going to have a much stronger arm. It's really been the same overall. Like, he can still make a couple big throws, but I mean, I think his arm strength is similar to that, or probably even less than a guy like Tua. And we've seen even Tua with the jumps and leaps and bounds he's made this season. So that's why I see Cam as more of a day 3 guy. I don't really think I think the Raiders would be looking for one of those more higher guys, as you mentioned. And I am a guy who's a Derek Carr fan, but it does kind of feel like it's time to move on from that, just the way the season's panned out. And I think Josh McDaniels would love to get his hands on a new guy. It's unfortunate how some of the past drafts have worked out for you guys, where you haven't been able to get some of those other building pieces to really surround him with that talent too, whoever your next quarterback is going to be. But as I mentioned for Cam, accuracy issues. He also gets sometimes in the pocket, he just gets a little like anxious and just throws the ball when he doesn't have to. He doesn't throw it away, but just throws the pass before he needs to. It's like you didn't need to check it down there. There was no one in the pocket. You could have waited for another 2 seconds and still been able to get it off. So I do really like Cam, and I think some team's going to be very happy. I think Cam Rising is capable of having a Case Keenum type season someday in the NFL, but he's not a day 1 or 2 guy to me right now.
Okay, good. Yeah, because when we're in our on our Raider Spaces, Twitter Spaces, a lot of people are talking about. I was like, well, let me ask somebody who knows him, who's seen every snap from him before we elevate him into a higher stratosphere. But big time weekend for the Pac-12. It should be fun times. You'll be watching our game. I'll be watching your game.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens there, and it would be fun to see see what happens in Utah. If they were able to win that game, USC wins that game, and then we just take a ride to Vegas and go and watch that one. That'd be fun. That'd be a fun game to watch as well. So
that would be sick, and I would love to see you down there, Dwayne. It would be a lot of fun.
Oh no, we'll definitely have a conversation if that game takes place. All right, JT, Wistrchill, we will. He is on Locked On Utes, so definitely everything Pac-12. Everything Utah Utes is all there, so it should be fun. It should be fun times. Listen to him, and also thank you for coming on our show. Take care, man.
Thanks, Dwayne. Always great talking with you.
Yep.